Serious, people who did a long time, 5 years plus, in prison. What was your biggest shock of the outside world? 5 years for aggravated assault and robbery. I was 3 months past my 18th birthday when I was sentenced. I lived in a small railroad town in south central PA. I guess one of the biggest shocks for me was how much the town had changed. The scrubland where we rode our bikes and dirt bikes is now a strip mall. My friend's driveway is now the main road through that part of town. Someone fixed up the old dive bar and turned it into a fairly popular restaurant and bar. Hell. Whole developments popped up all over the place. And while I wouldn't exactly call the changes gentrification, the town certainly has improved as far as standards of living, without ridiculously increasing the cost of living. Shock number 2 was internet access. AOL, NetZero, Earthlink, etc. were the go-tos then, but phased out within a couple years of my release as faster access from cable companies became more widely available and affordable. Great question. OP. I don't often get to chime in on this sub. Edit. I'm blown away by the response to this comment. Thank you for the upvotes, comments, questions, concern, and support. And thank you, kind strangers, for the awards. I interned at a private criminal defense firm. The most notable shock of any of our released clients had to be one man who in prison for 16 years, odd amount because he was paroled as part of plea deal. He had a daughter who was just a child at the time he was incarcerated. And when he got out, she had just had a baby. His first grandchild. She didn't tell him about the pregnancy beforehand. She wanted it to be a surprise upon his release. I wasn't there when our old client met his newest family member or his now adult daughter. But when he came in a few months later, he still couldn't talk about the new baby without crying happy tears. He had a picture in his wallet of his daughter when she was little he brought with him to prison. And showed us the new picture of his grandchild he keeps with it now. I was in for robbery too. Mandatory minimum of 5 years. 10 months. One of the hardest things for me once I got out was making choices. Let me explain. In prison, you might have 2 choices for shampoo if you're lucky. The first time I went shopping for hygiene essentials was at Target. I remember being so overwhelmed by the amount of choices for shampoo and having no idea which one to get. I stood in that aisle and cried for a few minutes before I just left without getting anything. Edit. Whoa. I did not expect so many responses. I am trying to respond to all the comments but I have to go to work right now. I will be responding later. Thank you for all of your thoughts. Edit 2. Thank you kind strangers for the awards. They are the first I've ever received. You forget about the details of things. Like the way carpet feels on the bottoms of your feet. What it feels like to shower completely alone and without flip-flops on. In prison you have a certain number of smells that you're exposed to every day. Think of them as the first page in a book. But when you get out you have the rest of the book available. It's a lot to take in all at once. With social media and everything. There's the acknowledgement of the passage of time. When I got locked up I left a lot of friends and family behind and did 3 years on my own. No visitors. No calls. No mail. When I got out it was a trip to get on Facebook and Instagram and see how everyone I was ever close to had moved on with their lives. Having kids. Getting married. Getting fat. Losing weight. Starting and quitting jobs. Falling out with each other. Some even passing away. People think about a prisoner doing time but don't understand that the time does them. You are frozen in it. While you're stuck in a constant loop of the same day every day. The rest of the world moves on without you. When you get home, you feel left behind. It's an anxious panic to catch up after that. I did 6 years. My biggest shock was finding out you can't do much of anything without a smartphone. Companies don't even do paper applications anymore. Just got out. Weirdest thing was seeing all these damn scooters laying everywhere. For my cousin. It was the Game Boy Advance. This was a while ago, 2006 or so. My cousin, who'd been in prison for about 10-15 years, Was finally getting out, so me and a bunch of the family went to pick him up. Then go get breakfast at some diner. I was just a little kid at the time, so I was playing with my Game Boy Advance while we were at the restaurant. I'll never forget how much the game I was playing blew my cousin's mind. He saw it and immediately said, "Holy shit. What is that? Look at those graphics. Oh my god. That's insane." His sister, "Are you seeing this shit?" To me, it was just some mess Star Wars game. But to my cousin, it was the future. It's actually through video games that me and him bonded a lot. I would tell him about or show him new stuff in the gaming industry, and he would tell me stories about the games he would play growing up. I work in jail, but when talking to a lifer who was about to go out on parole, I tried explaining smartphones, which blew his mind. Then I described Pokemon Go and he thought I was just messing with him. He got angry that I would make shit up. I wonder if he's running around playing Pokemon Go now. I have done 5+ years in prison. I was mostly amazed by smart TVs. With Netflix and browsers directly in the TV. And the 4 g internet speeds blew my mind as well. I occasionally work with people who've just gotten out of jail or prison. And if it's a longer stay, a weird thing I've noticed is how often they are enamored of things like Spotify. Like once a guy had just gotten out after 10 years and the first thing he wanted to do was get Spotify set up. He tried to connect through Facebook but couldn't remember his password. And although people getting out of jail are doing so much work to catch up, it's really distressing how little societal support there is if you don't have family to take you in. My father was a counselor in a state prison for 12+ years. He told me the inmates would often talk about wanting to feel their body submerged in water, taking a bath, swim, etc. There are only showers, so that feeling up being weightless, floating, submerged was something these men would fantasize about. I did 4 years. The day I got out, my uncle took me to Walmart to get everything I needed. I went off by myself to get the things on my list. First I went to the lotion aisle. I was looking at all the lotion and became so overwhelmed by all the choices. Dry skin, healing, scented, etc. In there I had no choices and was given what I needed. Having all these options overwhelmed me. I gave my list to my uncle to get it for me. It was really hard to go out in public for a while. The first night I tried sleeping in a dark bedroom like I did before prison, but couldn't do it. My dad slept on the living room couch with a TV on, so I slept on the other couch. I needed to sleep around people and noise for a while until I got used to being alone again. I was surprised, because one of the things I missed the most was sleeping in a dark, quiet room, alone in a comfortable bed. For a long time I slept with my arm or a pillow over my head because of noise and bugs. I went in around the first iPhone. Came out around 2014, and what disturbed me the most wasn't so much smartphones but how everyone everywhere had one in their hand staring at it. It felt very Black Mirror Twilight Zone-ish. I know a guy who did 2-3 years I think, and I worked construction with him. I asked him, what is the biggest thing that stands out to you now that you're free? He simply said, the fact that I'm here with you but I can physically walk over there to that field 500 meters away without anybody or any walls stopping me. I've never met a woman who has done that. Source. I'm a woman. Know lots of women. I think it's a pretty niche, porny thing. Not common like waxing your legs or getting a pedicure. I've never even seen it offered in a salon. I spent roughly 9 years in total at a maximum security prison for some dumb decisions I made as a juvenile. Self-checkout stands at stores and wireless headphones were definitely one of those. This can't be real moments. I questioned reality. Like when you cannot explain an instance and it scares you trying to cope with. Did that really happen? That's how it felt. I remember asking a co-worker of mine. He said first was that no one had taken his car. It sat for 6 years unmoved in the street. Tires held air and battery was dead but started with a push. Second was how quickly things had gone up in cost. rent, food, gas, things like that. This didn't personally happen to me, but I worked for a criminal justice reform group in Florida for about a year and a half. We connected with a guy who got released from prison after 50 years. He was arrested during one of the MLK riots in 1968 and locked away for half a century by an infamously racist and vindictive judge. As you can imagine, after so much time he was struggling with a lot. But the big things were that he didn't have any ID anymore and had no way to get it. Didn't know where his birth certificate or anything was. He said, "It's like I don't even exist anymore." Double quote. My brother served a little over 3 years, but the morning we picked him up we stopped by a grocery store to let him grab some snacks. He's walking back to the car with a stunned look on his face, and finally as he gets to us he goes, "I felt like I was on an acid trip. I haven't seen that many colors in so long. I need to sit down." My aunt was imprisoned for about 25 years as a political prisoner in China. When she was released she was just agape at the cityscape and how it had changed. The smartphones. Being able to pay by just scanning with WeChat, very commonplace there. For paying something like parking it is very convenient. All the cars. The fashion everyone wears now compared to her closet of clothes she had before being taken away so suddenly, literally. She was kidnapped from my mom's family in broad daylight. Unannounced. In the end she took it all in much better than we all had expected. Right before the pandemic. She had just finished a 3-month vacation in Gillen with my other aunts. According to her, Gillen has changed the least. Cousin did 5 for meth and robbery. When she came out she started crying when she saw my youngest sister was almost an adult. Robbery if it was armed. I get. But 5 years for meth? That's outrageous. I really hope that was just a tail end or something. But then again, you're reading this from someone who doesn't believe drug crimes should be crimes per se. Spent 6 years behind bars. When I got out the biggest shock was the beautiful sights and colors. I forgot how gorgeous nature was. It put the thought into my mind that I never want to go back. Because there is no beauty in prison. The beauty is on the outside. I'm glad I'm out now. And every day still taking the amazing outside world for what it is. Edit. I also am having fun with new technology. Lol. There was this older guy who used to drive a forklift for me. He had done 10 years for manslaughter. I never got the full details because he was a good guy and a great worker. So I didn't care. He went in his early 20s and came out in his 30s. So by the time I knew him, his prison days were already 20 years in the past. So apparently, he went in and his eyesight was bad all his life. But he was too poor to go see someone about it. His eyes were never checked, and so basically by the time he got out, his eyes were completely shot and he couldn't see well at all. The halfway house he was in paid for him to see an eye doctor and he got new glasses that fixed his vision. He recalled to me that it was such an amazing thing to see leaves on trees. He said the world was all pretty much splotches and to see detail like that blew his mind. I drive Uber and picked up a guy that had just finished 15 years for drug charges. He had only been out a few days and thought the Apple CarPlay in my car was some type of alien witchcraft. I ended up telling him to move to the front seat and let him DCK around with the system for the duration. He really got into the endless music that Apple Music had to offer. Edit for typos. That's awesome. I've never been to prison and I remember the first time I got Spotify and was so amazed I could just search for music and listen to it so easily. A friend of mine was in prison from age 16 to 32. And he said the biggest hurdle to overcome was trying to learn how to date and have healthy relationships without going through the process of dating during adolescence and early adulthood. He had to learn to meet his partners where they were at and to understand that the women his age often had relationship experiences that they carried with them, positive and negative, that would impact them in their current relationships. He couldn't relate because he didn't have that baggage. So he had to learn it through them rather than by his own experience. He also strongly advocates for the need for comprehensive sex education and education about healthy relationships in juvenile detention and prison. I did 5 years. As I went, and after 2 weeks my dad died. 6 months before I came home, my husband died. It's weird when you get out and realize time hasn't stood still. Although I know it won't, you kind of think it does. My kids were all 5 years older, obviously, yet the home was still the same. It was weird after 5 years. I think if I did longer it would have blown my mind. Although reality isn't a thing in prison. I met a dude who had just gotten out of prison after 15 years. He said that his immediate shock was just seeing color. He said that everything in the joint was grey looking. He went to Walmart and was overwhelmed by all the colors he had not seen in 15 years. I knew a guy who went in around 2005, I want to say. Got out a few years later and we were driving around. He kept pointing to people on the street asking, "What are those?" Apostrophe. This was downtown Seattle at the height of hipsters. That was a difficult thing to explain. Ended up with the New Goths as a best translation. A homie of mine found the freedom really obscure. He was so used to the guards telling him what to do that he got accustomed to it. He was really anxious because he had no sense of direction. On a lighter note, he was amazed by Snapchat filters. He kept on posting on his Snapchat story all selfie videos with filters. When I got to ride in a car again, it felt like we were going about warp 15. I think we're only moving about 45 miles an hour. It tickled my dinky like a roller coaster for about 10 seconds. Also, at the grocery store it was really hard seeing people willfully buying cans of tuna. But I think the hardest thing for me was to quit crushing up spicy Cheetos and putting them in all my food. I had an older gentleman come in one day and he seemed a little off. Not like weird. Just like he felt out of place. He came up to pay after his meal. And I was making small talk with him. Kinda laughing and joking. Waitress shit. Whatever. He hands me his card and it's a JPay card. Which is what you use to get upon release from prison. I swipe it and hand it back. And suddenly he seems overwhelmed. I asked him if he was okay. And he was like, "This is the first place I stopped after I got released. I was afraid you were going to treat me different after you saw my card. I haven't been in public in 20 years. Double quote. I have literally no idea what he did. I don't plan on ever looking him up. But like I was nice to him. He was emotional because I treated him like a person. I did 1/2 on a 6-year sentence. I think my initial shock was how the physical landscape had changed. Places that were once vast swathes of field were now car dealerships and homes. The other one was how people treated and spoke to one another out here. I wanted to fight everyone for about 6 months. Walmart. My first day out. I had an unreasonable fear the exit would close or I would get lost, so I kept glancing towards the exit every 20 steps or so. I didn't think of using a shopping cart, so my hands were full of clothes. Took me about 7 trips to feel comfortable in Walmart. Food? I was sick from the Grade D not for human consumption stamped on the boxes, meat and rotted vegetables I was forced to eat for 7 years. Prisons know about inspections months in advance and prepare for them. The rest of your stay you will be fed garbage and caged and treated like an animal. After getting out you find you have no rights and are cast from society to only work undesirable jobs. You never leave the prison. The bars just get wider. Speaking about my good mate, since he doesn't use Reddit. He did a couple different stunts that landed him time, but he was surprised at who all got in contact with him after getting out. While he was in, only a handful of people kept tabs on him. Visited or called, but as soon as he got out all these people he hadn't heard from started congratulating him. He said it probably shouldn't have surprised him, but it did. He didn't want any of that and thought all of it felt so disingenuous. My stepdad killed the guy who raped his sister and ended up in jail for like 30+ years, I think. He initially had a shorter sentence, but I think he tried to escape a few times or something. Anyway, he was so baffled by stores and how big they were and the sheer amount of stuff in them. Like, his mind was blown when he found out there was a whole aisle dedicated to cereal. And he would actually get overwhelmed really easily while shopping because it was so different from just marking a few items on a piece of paper and having them brought to you. Oh. And he didn't know what glow sticks were. The first time the family got glow sticks in his presence, I gave him one. And he was actually afraid of it. I remember him asking, "Is it gonna explode?" And we all just laughed. My cousin was in jail for 16 years I believe and got out in 2017, and I remember showing him Minecraft and he said it was the coolest thing he had seen even before prison. I showed him some other games and he was absolutely blown away. I don't think I have ever seen a jaw drop down so far. I was in charge of helping guys in a halfway house find housing and jobs. There was this 73-year-old man who had been in for a long time. I forgot how long, but it was definitely over 10 years. Anyways, I have to give it to this guy because he was on it with finding a job even though he had already had VA assistance set up. A difficulty he was having is how you are almost required to have a cell phone these days. I remember him getting frustrated because he saw a job posting on a bulletin board but it didn't even have a phone number to call. It was one of those text, "Word here," to 30,401 now deals to schedule something. Finally a question I can answer. So I never spent time in prison, but I work as a liaison for people who were in prison doing company business and I help them get oriented upon release. I find them a place to stay and a job to work that won't care about their prior name changes and identity renewal. The biggest challenge was a guy who did 20 years from 1999 for kidnapping and attempted murder. Cell phones were probably the hardest thing to help him figure out, as we were able to transition from traditional number pads to QWERTY keyboards. I had to crash course him on how to first use a computer and then transfer that over to his new cell phone, which is now a mini computer in his pocket. Every once in a while when we are out eating, not anymore due to COVID, he would want to call his buddy to join us and walk around looking for a payphone. I did 93 months in federal prison. After I got released we stopped at a Burger King. There were 4 of us in the car and our food cost $24.00. I kept saying there was something wrong, that they must have made a mistake. I couldn't believe how much it cost. Other than that, it was taking a shower barefooted. It felt so surreal. My brother went to jail just before GameCube came out. Video games was one of the only things we had in common. So I showed him the GameCube when he got back. He popped open the top of the console and gently picked out the tiny disc. Other consoles used regular sized CDs for their games at the time. He cradled it in his hands and said with hushed awe, "How long have I been gone?" Double quote. The selection of stuff, groceries, clothes, deodorant, etc. I served 5 years and was really thrown for a loop my first trip to a store. My SO told me to go pick out bacon. No bacon in Texas prison. She had to come get me from the bacon section because I literally got stuck looking at all the choices. I'm still a bit overwhelmed by the multitude of choices there seem to be for everything. Inside you just bought Irish Spring or Dial, one kind of toothpaste, etc. Out here, there are entire f***ing aisles of these products. Being in cars. I got car sick for years after. Also you go from almost everything being done or decided for you to free will and so many damn options. Also I had a serious problem with staying home all day in the beginning. I would go for 4 hours walks BC I could. My dad spent a little over 4 years in prison. When he got out he had my grandma leave him at the grocery store so he could catch himself up with the current prices of everything and plan to call her on a payphone when he was ready to go home. Before he went to prison there was one on every corner. Guess how many there were when he got out? 0. A guy I worked with had done 25 years. Said he struggled to adjust to doing whatever he wanted and missed the daily routines. They couldn't get greasy fast food so his diet was better. Because of that his skin didn't age much and his face was unwrinkled and supple. He was 45 but looked 25. He also had to wear heavy makeup to conceal a swastika tattoo on his forehead.